Meghan believed the palace could distance itself from her, criticize her choices, and restrict her access, but never erase the royal legacy attached to her name. Then, Prince William issued an order so absolute that even senior courtiers paused before carrying it out. Every remaining royal patronage connected to Meghan was to be permanently removed, reassigned, and sealed against restoration. When the message reached California, her confidence vanished in a single devastating moment. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan read the notice once, then again. The words did not change. Her hand tightened around the table, and the silence became unbearable. Across from her, Prince Harry watched her face lose its confidence before she asked the question neither wanted answered. Had William truly used the word permanent? The answer was yes. Royal patronages are official links through which royals support charities, and for Meghan, they meant more than ceremony. They were the last institutional proof that she had served the monarchy, carried its name, and held a place. Removing them meant cutting the final official thread connecting her identity to royal duty. William had signed the order himself. The prince authorized the removal of every patronage still associated with Meghan, directed each one to be reassigned or concluded, and barred any future restoration under her name. He had taken responsibility for protecting the crown's future, especially where the Sussex connection created confusion over who could represent royal authority. Harry pushed back from the table, anger rising fast. He called the decision vindictive, but his wife did not answer. She stared at the first page, stunned by its meaning. This was not a routine adjustment. It was a declaration that the institution would preserve the memory of her service while erasing every sign of her former role. Then Meghan reached the final clause. No negotiation could restore the patronages. No reconciliation could reopen them. No senior royal could intervene later and return what William had removed. The future king had not left a door open. He had sealed it. Charles had known beforehand. The king had seen the decision and chosen not to stop it, proving William's authority was no longer symbolic. He had acted, and the monarch had allowed it to stand. Meghan looked at Harry and said the order was too sudden, exact, and carefully prepared to be punishment. Something had triggered it. But before she could challenge William, she had to face a truth. This was not only about patronages, it was about the people who no longer trusted her to carry the crown's name. Behind the official language stood three people bound by family, resentment, and memories none of them could fully escape. William saw a monarchy that needed protection. Harry saw a brother using royal power to punish his wife. Meghan saw the final destruction of a position she believed still belonged to her history. Yet beneath their anger was something more dangerous than hatred. Each believed the other had betrayed a promise made long ago. William carried a burden Harry no longer shared. As heir, the prince was responsible for protecting the line between active royal service and private influence. A royal patronage is an official bond between a member of the monarchy and a charitable organization, and even an inactive connection can still suggest palace approval. To him, that confusion had become dangerous. Meghan saw something entirely different. Those patronages were not empty titles or forgotten names on old records. They reflected the public service identity she had built during her short time inside the royal family. She had spoken for causes, stood beside organizations, and believed that work remained part of who she was, even after she stepped away. William remembered every moment when royal initiatives became tangled with Sussex interviews, business deals, and personal accusations. Each time the future king had remained silent, hoping distance would calm the damage. Instead, he began to believe that restraint had been mistaken for weakness, and that every unanswered controversy made the crown look uncertain. She told him the palace was not simply removing positions, it was rewriting her contribution, reducing years of work to a problem that needed to be cleaned away. To her, they were removing her version of history and leaving only the palace's account behind. Harry reached for his phone and called a former palace aide. His voice hardened as he demanded to know whether William had personally approved the wording of the order. Silence followed. Then the aide answered through a private recorded conversation. Every line. He pushed his chair back, ended the call without goodbye, and stared across the room in disbelief. William had not approved a general recommendation prepared by staff. He had reviewed each patronage separately, considered its history, and judged whether any connection should survive. That detail made the decision feel colder, because it proved nothing had been overlooked. Every removal had received his direct attention. Catherine had challenged him before the signature. In a private conversation, she urged her husband to separate duty from emotion. He remained calm and told her that leaving the issue unresolved would create a greater crisis later. She heard no anger in his voice, only certainty. Years of mistrust had prepared the ground, but they had not caused the final order. One recent ceremony had changed everything. To understand why William chose permanence over compromise, the story had to return to the public moment that convinced him Meghan's royal connections could no longer remain untouched. The order did not begin in a legal office or during a heated family argument. It began at a charity ceremony where Meghan was never expected to appear. Yet her name suddenly dominated the room. What seemed like a minor breach of protocol became the moment William could no longer ignore. A patronage linked to the crown had been used to suggest Meghan still spoke with royal authority, and one sentence changed everything. Several organizations once connected to Meghan had continued mentioning her royal service long after she stepped away. A royal patronage is an official relationship between a member of the monarchy and a charity, and even an old reference can imply continuing palace approval. That uncertainty mattered because the public could no longer tell where royal duty ended and private influence began. William's office had already asked those organizations to separate past service from present activity. The prince wanted every reference to make clear that Meghan no longer represented the crown. Yet enforcement remained cautious. No one wanted another public family crisis, so warnings stayed private. Letters remained polite, and the danger was allowed to grow. Then came the Commonwealth Women's Leadership Ceremony at St. James's Palace. The event was meant to celebrate public service across the Commonwealth. The group of nations linked through shared history and cooperation with the Crown. Meghan was not listed as a participant. Her name was not expected to appear. William sat in the front row when the host announced a recorded message from Meghan beneath her former royal patronage designation. The words implied she still carried official authority. His expression tightened. He slowly placed the program on the empty chair beside him and said nothing. Catherine noticed immediately. She leaned closer and quietly asked him not to react inside the room. He agreed, but the silence did not calm him. After the ceremony, William told her the crown could not allow private branding to borrow institutional legitimacy. She heard restraint in his voice, but beneath it sat something colder: decision. Meghan later rejected the accusation during a recorded call with Harry and a former advisor. She insisted she had not approved the introduction and believed the organization was honoring her earlier work. The wording, she said, belonged to the host. Yet, the explanation did little to ease the damage because her name had still been used as if nothing had changed. Palace staff then uncovered the deeper problem. The message had been coordinated through an advisor who had received a written warning months earlier not to use Meghan's former royal designation. A confidential review also revealed 3 other organizations preparing similar acknowledgments. William now saw a pattern, not a mistake. He requested a private meeting with Harry and Meghan and offered one final chance to settle the matter before formal action began. The ceremony had supplied the trigger, but the confrontation ahead would turn a dispute over titles into the most personal clash between William and Meghan since the royal break began. There were no cameras, no press secretaries, and no carefully arranged public smiles. When William finally faced Meghan, Harry sat between them, but even he could not soften what was about to happen. William arrived carrying no stack of papers and offered no ceremonial greeting. He came with one question: would Meghan formally surrender every remaining patronage connection? Her answer was immediate. His response ended the possibility of compromise. The closed room made every word heavier. The meeting had been arranged during a brief Sussex visit to Britain, with no aides present and no institutional buffer between them. A joint statement, William explained, would publicly confirm that Meghan's former patronages belonged only to the working monarchy, the group of royals who carry out official duties on behalf of the crown. William offered the solution without raising his voice. Meghan could acknowledge that her earlier work remained part of history, while surrendering any continuing royal association with the organizations. The prince believed that single statement would end the confusion, protect the charities, and spare Charles another public family crisis. Meghan leaned forward before he finished. She said she would not erase work that had genuinely mattered to her. Those causes had not been props, and the people she supported had not become meaningless simply because she left palace life. Her refusal landed hard. William held her gaze. The future king told her the issue was not success outside the monarchy. It was authority borrowed from the crown. Meghan accused him of treating her independence like a threat because she had built influence beyond palace control. He answered that private influence became dangerous when royal credentials were still being used to strengthen it. Harry cut in sharply. He called the demand humiliating, unnecessary, and designed to punish his wife. William turned toward his brother and said the unresolved patronages had become another battlefield their father should not have to manage. Charles had carried the family's division long enough, and silence was no longer protecting anyone. Then William revealed what the palace held. Written correspondence showed Sussex advisors repeatedly asking charities to reference Meghan's former royal credentials when arranging appearances and partnerships. He had reviewed the documented account himself. Meghan denied authorizing those requests. She insisted staff had acted without her direct approval. William did not move. Responsibility, he said, could not disappear simply because instructions traveled through advisors. Meghan pushed her chair back and stood. She accused him of arriving with the decision already made. William remained seated and answered quietly, "I was hoping you would make it unnecessary." Harry followed her out without another word. After the door closed, William called King Charles privately and asked permission to activate the permanent removal process. The confrontation had ended without agreement. Now, one question remained. Did William truly possess the power to erase Meghan's patronages forever, or was someone higher allowing him to do it? William may have signed the order, but royal authority is never as simple as one's signature. Behind his decision stood private constitutional advice, the monarch's consent, and a carefully constructed transfer of influence. Meghan believed Charles could still intervene. Harry believed their father would never permit total removal. Yet, inside Buckingham Palace, the king faced a choice between protecting his son and protecting the future crown. Charles read the recommendation alone. The silence around him felt heavier with every page. Royal patronages operate through personal invitation, palace approval, agreement from the organization, and the authority of the sovereign, the monarch, whose support gives the role its official weight. That structure meant Meghan's consent was emotionally important, but not legally required. The king reached the final clause and stopped. He removed his glasses, rested one hand on the unsigned approval page, and thought of Harry. Approval would not merely confirm William's authority. It could deepen the divide between his sons until reconciliation became almost impossible. William entered later without anger. The prince explained that his growing role in long-term royal planning gave him responsibility for deciding who could represent the monarchy in the next reign. Leaving former patronages unresolved, he warned, would allow private influence and official authority to remain dangerously mixed. Charles listened without interrupting. He understood the argument, but he also understood the cost. Harry would see punishment. Meghan would see erasure. The future king would see protection. All three could look at the same decision and believe they alone understood its meaning. William chose his next words carefully. Avoiding pain today, he said, would create greater confusion tomorrow. Charities would continue using old royal links. Advisors would keep testing boundaries, and every future dispute would return to the same unanswered question. Who truly speaks for the crown? Palace legal advisors had already delivered their conclusion through a documented briefing. The patronages could be reassigned without Meghan's permission because they had been granted through royal service, not personal ownership. She had carried them, but she had never possessed them. Charles then made the most important choice. The king did not issue the removal directly. Instead, he expanded William's mandate, a formal grant of responsibility, allowing him to control the monarchy's future patronage structure and proceed in his own name. The monarch signed the authorization and placed the pen down. He looked toward his private secretary and said, "No public triumph. This is a family loss, even if it is necessary." William left with the authority he needed. Within hours, his office began contacting every affected organization before Meghan could respond. By the time she understood how completely Charles had stepped aside, the palace machinery was already moving, and the first visible pieces of her royal identity were beginning to disappear. The removal did not happen with one dramatic announcement. It unfolded through a series of quiet calls that were somehow more brutal. One organization changed its website, another removed Meghan's ceremonial biography, a third prepared to welcome a new royal patron. Each alteration confirmed the same truth. William's order was not symbolic. It was being executed line by line, institution by institution, until nothing remained to connect Meghan officially to royal service. William's office contacted each affected charity with the same controlled message. Their royal affiliations would be reviewed, reassigned, or suspended until a working royal accepted responsibility. A working royal is a family member who carries out official duties on behalf of the crown, and that distinction now decided who could keep these roles. The organizations received careful instructions. Meghan's earlier service could remain in historical records, but every phrase suggesting present authority music had to disappear. Her speeches could be remembered, her visits could be acknowledged. Yet, the living connection between her name and the monarchy had to end. Meghan opened the website of an organization she had once championed and froze. Her royal patron designation was gone. She refreshed the page once, then again, believing the change might be a mistake. When the same words returned without her title, she understood that someone had deliberately removed it. Harry saw the anger in her face before it faded into sadness. Meghan told him the palace was preserving the memory of her work while cutting her away from its living meaning. They could keep the photographs, the old statements, and the public praise. They simply no longer wanted her attached to what came next. Harry reached for his phone and began preparing a public attack against William. His wife stopped him. She feared that an emotional response would be presented as proof that the prince had been right to act. Silence hurt, but a furious statement could hand the palace another victory. Then a private message arrived from one charity director. In a documented email, the director thanked Meghan for everything she had done and admitted the organization had no power to resist the palace instruction. The kindness made the loss sharper because it confirmed the decision had already moved beyond personal appeals. Catherine soon received a proposal to take over one of the most prominent patronages. The princess read the transfer, closed the folder, and looked directly at William. She said she would not accept until she knew the move served the charity rather than humiliated Meghan. William did not answer immediately. Her hesitation created the first crack in the certainty surrounding his order. The removals had begun, but the emotional turning point would not come through lawyers or courters. It would come when Catherine asked William whether duty had finally crossed into punishment. William had defended the decision as necessary, lawful, and final. Catherine did not dispute the danger of blurred royal authority, but she saw something he had forced himself not to see. Beneath the titles and patronages stood a wounded family. With no aides present, music and no papers between them, she asked whether permanence was truly required, or whether anger had entered the room disguised as duty. Catherine understood why the patronages could not continue under uncertain terms. A royal patronage is an official bond between the crown and a charity, and leaving that bond unclear could suggest authority where none remained. Yet the word forever troubled her. It turned an institutional correction into something that sounded like an emotional sentence. William held his ground. The prince warned that any restoration clause would invite endless negotiations and encourage Meghan's advisors to treat royal status as something pressure could recover. To him, uncertainty had already caused enough damage. A closed door, however painful, was safer than one that could be forced open again. Late that evening, Catherine sat opposite him in a private room with no aides nearby. She asked him to explain the decision without using the words protocol, institution, or future. The question stripped away every formal defense he had relied upon. William looked down before answering. He admitted that he was exhausted by years of conflict, accusations, and half-finished attempts at peace. Every concession he feared would reopen wounds the family had never healed. He no longer believed silence could protect anyone. Catherine listened, then told him, Meghan may have crossed serious boundaries, but removal must not become revenge. The princess warned that duty loses its moral force when anger begins shaping the punishment. William answered that refusing to act would betray every working royal who accepted limits, scrutiny, and sacrifice without demanding special treatment. The silence between them changed something. Catherine proposed one final distinction. The patronages would remain permanently removed, but Meghan's completed charitable work music would be formally acknowledged rather than quietly erased. The order could define the present without rewriting the past. William resisted at first. Then he reached for the original announcement, crossed out its cold final paragraph, and replaced it with language recognizing Meghan's service during her time in the royal household. And Catherine had not reversed the decision, but she had changed its meaning. The revised announcement was released the following morning. It carried discipline, music acknowledgement, and finality in equal measure. Yet, instead of calming the crisis, it ignited a public argument larger than the palace expected. Catherine had softened the words without weakening the order. But once the decision reached the public, neither compassion nor royal discipline could prevent the storm that followed. By sunrise, the private royal decision had become a national argument. Supporters called it overdue discipline. Critics called it institutional eraser. Television studios filled with former courtiers, charity leaders, and constitutional voices, debating whether William had protected the crown or punished a woman who had already left it behind. Then one newspaper front page captured the entire conflict in 4 unforgiving words, and Meghan saw it before the palace issued its explanation. The palace moved quickly. Its announcement confirmed that Meghan's former royal patronages had been permanently reassigned or concluded, while formally recognizing the work she completed as a working member of the family. A royal patronage is an official bond between a royal figure and a charity, and the statement made clear that such roles must now belong only to active representatives accountable to the sovereign and the monarchy's public duties. Outside Buckingham Palace, the story became impossible to contain. A crowd gathered around the morning newspaper stand's music as the London Herald displayed its front page. William closes Meghan's royal door. Some readers called the words cruel. Others said they finally expressed what the palace had avoided saying for years. Meghan saw the headline before the full explanation reached California. She sat beside Harry as commentators debated whether Catherine had replaced her. The comparison cut deeper than the removal itself. She told him the story had turned years of service into a competition between 2 women, reducing complicated lives to a simple victory and defeat. Harry felt his anger rising again. He began drafting a fierce response that named William and condemned Charles for allowing the decision to stand. Yet after reading it aloud, he stopped. His wife warned that an attack would bury her charitable record beneath another family war. William watched the evening coverage in silence. A major broadcaster placed Meghan's former patronage photograph beside his signed announcement and called the move the clearest boundary yet music between the Sussex brand and the crown. When an advisor praised the decisiveness of the decision, the prince answered that there was nothing victorious about removing a family member from royal history. Several organizations then issued public statements thanking Meghan for her earlier work while welcoming the new structure. Their careful words denied both sides complete control. She had mattered, but the connection had ended. Harry finally released a shorter statement affirming his wife's service without directly attacking his father or brother. The public battle cooled, but the personal question remained. Meghan now had to choose whether to spend years fighting for what had been removed or build an identity music without any royal attachment. The newspapers had delivered their judgment, but the final verdict would belong to Meghan, William, and the monarchy they could no longer share. The royal patronages were gone. No appeal restored them. No private intervention delayed the order, and no public argument changed William's decision. Yet the true ending was not written in the palace announcement. It came days later when Meghan stopped searching for a path back to the identity she had lost. For the first time, she faced a future in which her work, her influence, music, and her failures would belong entirely to her. Meghan read the final palace notice without anger. Every remaining royal patronage tied to her name had now been removed, concluded, or transferred to an active member of the monarchy. A royal patronage is an official bond between the crown and a charity, and those bonds now belonged only to people carrying out public duties on behalf of the sovereign. The decision created a boundary that could not be misunderstood. Former working royals could keep their history, their memories, and recognition for past service, but they could not preserve active royal authority outside official duty. William had not erased the past, he had sealed the present. Meghan placed the notice inside a drawer instead of leaving it on her desk. She closed it slowly and told Harry she would not ask William to reverse the order. He looked at her in disbelief, certain that acceptance meant surrender. Harry challenged her, but she answered with quiet resolve. Continuing to fight, she explained, would allow the palace to define every future chapter of her life. If every achievement remained tied to what had been removed, then the monarchy would still control her identity long after the titles were gone. William received confirmation that all transfers were complete. The prince did not celebrate. He looked toward Catherine and admitted that the crown was safer, but the family was smaller. She understood the cost, because her revised acknowledgement remained in the permanent palace record, preserving Meghan's charitable work, even though her authority had ended forever. Charles accepted the truth with sadness. The king now understood that his sons occupied separate worlds, and no order could bring those worlds together. Protecting the monarchy had not healed the family, but delaying the decision would only have prolonged confusion, resentment, and false hope. Meghan lost the last institutional links to royal life, but she also lost the illusion that those links might restore her place one day. William secured a clearer crown. Yet the victory carried no joy. Royal belonging had reached its final definition. Memory, marriage, fame, and sympathy were not enough. Only active duty preserved authority. The palace door did not remain half open. William closed it. Meghan stopped reaching for it, and the monarchy moved forward with a painful clarity none of them could ever undo. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next